All right, everyone. Welcome to In the Free Zone with Norm, and welcome to the Saturday Breakdown, Week 2. Week 2's in the books. With some great action last night. Start off with just a little bit of news. I believe everybody in the state, except for the Kansas City, Kansas public schools, is now at least practicing and working on playing football in the near future. I believe several of the Wichita City schools start playing today. Some of the Johnson County schools that had not been playing before started playing last night. The Olathe schools for sure. I believe Blue Valley schools will be playing soon. And I think that Shawnee Mission schools voted to play just a couple of days ago. And so if they have not been practicing, it's going to be a couple weeks before they've got enough practices in to play. You've got to have 9 practices, 9 days of practice before you can play a game. So they'll have to get those practices in before they can play, but they should be playing soon. Now, that being said, there were also games in the state that were canceled because of positive tests and things like that. And if you remember last week, I told you that I was in quarantine because of exposure to COVID-19. I tested positive, and so I'm still in quarantine until next weekend. I'm doing fine. I have got a cough. I've got some headaches. I still have not run a fever. So, so far we're seeing how it progresses, but so far so good. Now, we're going to talk about action here in Southwest Kansas. We're going to talk about a little bit of action in the Oklahoma and Texas Panhandles, and then we're going to talk about some games around the state that are of note. And we'll start right in with the High Plains League. First game up in the High Plains League. In the High Plains League, we're playing some out-of-state schools. Lakin and Stratford played, and Stratford is a traditional power in the Texas Panhandle, and they got on top of Lakin 38-16 last night. Although to me, I think Lakin probably played pretty well from what I've seen. Southwestern Heights took it on the chin 57-0 from Texhoma. And that showed me that Texhoma appears to be rebounding from last year. They had an uncharacteristically down year for Texhoma last year, and they certainly look to be rebounding from that. Syracuse and Elkhart was another surprise. This was one of my picks that I missed. I missed 3 on my picks, and this is one of them. I thought that, Syracuse had been down long enough that Elkhart would probably still be the team to pick in that game. Syracuse beat Elkhart 33-6. Syracuse is off to their first 2-0 start since 1999, believe it or not. That's 21 years since they've started this well. And in the last High Plains League game, Sublette 48, Stanton County 22. So Sublette looking a little stronger than they've looked in the past, too. It'll be exciting to see what's going on with them. Now, let's take a look at the WAC. Hayes looks strong in the WAC with a 43-14 win over Great Bend last night. This one was never even really close, to be honest with you. Another one that also... it may have been a little closer than the score would indicate, but was a pretty dominant performance. Dodge City 35, Liberal 0. That game was somewhat close until the middle of the third when Dodge City kind of opened it up a little more. And in a barn burner of a game last night, Garden City jumped out to a good lead on Hutchinson. Hutchinson came back late in the game and beat Garden City 21-20. That was, Garden City led most of this game. Hutchinson came back late in the game with the 21-20 win, but to me, both teams, it looked like from what I saw, played well. It was a great game for both teams. All right, let's turn our attention now to the Great Western Athletic Conference. Colby, 21-8 over Cimarron. To be honest with you, that's closer than I expected it to be. Cimarron played Colby pretty well. Cimarron is 0-2, but 0-2, they're still a pretty darn good team for an 0-2 team. Okay, I think the problem is, of course, in the GWAC, they've got some real competition. Okay, Cimarron left the High Plains League. If they were still in the High Plains League, chances are they'd be 2-0 at this point. But in the GWAC, they've run into some pretty stiff competition. They lost to Holcomb last week, Colby this week. They've got Scott City on the schedule next week. Now, hopefully, that'll be a really good game between Cimarron and Scott City, because Cimarron, I think, has got a good team. And once they get out of the GWAC, I think they're going to be fine. Ulysses 6, Hugoton 28. Hugoton only had 18 players suited up because of COVID quarantines. Okay, so for Hugoton to get a big win over their rival Ulysses with only 18 suited up, that's a great sign for the Eagles. In one of those area games of the week, Holcomb 30, Scott City 13. Now, Scott City was ranked number 9 coming into this game, 1-0. Holcomb was also 1-0 with a win over Hugoton, I believe, in week 1. No, a win over Ulysses in week 1. And Holcomb, really, to be honest with you, this game also was one that Holcomb had a pretty comfortable lead most of the game. Okay, and that's against a pretty darn good Scott City team. Goodland, who was off to a 1-0 start, lost in overtime to Bridgeport, Nebraska, 26-20. But Goodland's shown a little more strength this year than they've shown in the past, and that's great. All right, now let's take a look at the South Plains Iroquois Athletic Association. That's the SPA Iroquois League. Hodgman County 52, South Central 6. A big win there for Hodgman County. South Gray 52, Satanta 0. Meade 64, Ingalls 16. And in kind of the game of the week in the Iroquois League, Spearville 38, Mineola 22. Those are two teams that have been very strong in the Iroquois League and in 8-man football in the last 2 or 3 years. Spearville comes out on top 38-22, and that is a fairly low-scoring game for an 8-man game, to be honest with you. And in another one, Buckland 52, Kiowa County 42. That is a big win for Buckland. Buckland has not been real good the last few years, and so every win is a big win, but a 52-42 win over Kiowa County is a great one for Buckland. A couple of 6-man scores for you. Moscow 41, Rolla 9. That is, again, a huge rivalry game. We had a lot of big rivalry games in week 2 across the state, and that's one of them right there, Moscow and Rolla. Moscow out on top 41-9. And the other one from the area would be Fowler 34, Burton 71. Now, if you haven't seen 6-man football, you got to kind of see it to appreciate it. So I would encourage all of you to check out some 6-man football at some point. If you get a chance to go to a game, go to a game. A great time to go is the shootout that they have, where they have their state championship. It's held in Dodge City, and they actually play 2 games. They play for a 3rd and 4th, and then they play for 1st and 2nd. You can also usually catch it catching a live streaming on the internet, but it is something to see. Everybody ought to check out 6-man ball at least once in their lives. All right, now let's take a look at the Oklahoma and Texas schools, and then we'll take a look. Actually, let's take a look at the rest of Kansas. Then we'll come back to the Oklahoma and Texas schools. In a big game in the Wichita area, the Holy War, Cape and Mount Carmel and Bishop Carroll High School. Carroll comes out on top 31-28. A lot of people thought that this might be Capen's year. Capen had lost 20 straight coming into this game in the Holy War, and now it's 21 straight. Carroll on top 31-28. But I'm going to tell you, Capen gave them a heck of a game, guys. Another game that to me was surprisingly close through most of the game, although it got opened up a little bit late, was Derby 43, Newton 31. Newton's defense played particularly well. They had at least one pick six, and Derby stuck with them. This was a close game. Another surprisingly close game from the MCL, the Mid-Continent League, Phillipsburg 13, Smith Center 21. Going into the Kansas City area, Lansing 12, Piper 7. Now, Piper playing all of their games on the road this year because they play in a county that won't let them play. Okay, so because of that, they're playing all of their regular season games on the road. From Topeka, Seaman 28, Hayden 22. In another rivalry game and a surprisingly close game, Junction City 36, Manhattan 29. And one of the best individual performances in the state last night occurred in that game. Quarterback Andrew Curry of Junction City, 14 of 24 for 291 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's a big night for the quarterback. We'll come back and talk about some other individual performances in a minute. But that was definitely one of them. And, of course, a couple of receivers had big nights for Junction City as well. Another rivalry game in the Wichita area, El Dorado 14, Augusta 7. And some Johnson County action, Olathe West 20, Olathe Northwest 0. Paola was 41-38 over Spring Hill, another school from right there in that Kansas City area. Aquinas 28, St. James Academy 0. And in a game that was played on a neutral field because it was scheduled at the last minute, Pratt and Girard both had open dates. They managed to get something scheduled at the last minute. Of course, Girard down in the southeast corner of the state. So instead of taking that long road trip all the way, the two of them met at a neutral field in between. I don't remember exactly where they played. I'm sure I could look it up. I believe they played at a junior college field somewhere between. Pratt wins 20-19. That's a big win for the Greenbacks. Girard has been a traditionally strong program down there. In what some people, and back to the Johnson County area, what some people expected to be the game of the week in Kansas, 5A number 1 Mill Valley versus 5A number 4 DeSoto, and this one ends up being kind of a blowout. Mill Valley 70, DeSoto 21. Another traditional rivalry here, Hoisington 35, Larned 19. Larned hung close with the Cardinals for about 3 quarters, and then Hoisington pulled away late. More Johnson County action, Olathe North 41 over Gardner Edgerton 0. And in a game that I kind of followed on Twitter, I unfortunately couldn't see it live, but followed by the live tweets going on last night, Eisenhower 45, Salina Central 42 in overtime. And that was a heck of a game last night. Also a little bit of 8-man action, Hoxie 36, La Crosse 14, La Crosse's first year at 8-man and their first loss, I believe. And in another game between two traditional powers in 8-man, Ness City 6, Hill City 7, and that is an extremely low scoring game for 8-man. 8-man's usually a pretty high scoring game. One other thing I definitely want to mention, Bishop Ward ended the state's longest losing streak at 57 games last night with a 39-6 win over McLouth. So congratulations to Bishop Ward. Having been a coach who at one time held the state's longest losing streak, I know how exciting that is for a team to break a streak like that. When I was at Elkhart, we broke a 44-game losing streak, which at that time was the longest losing streak in the state of Kansas, and that was a pretty exciting time. So big congratulations to Bishop Ward for that last night. All right, let's take a look at some individual performances from Kansas in one that I definitely followed and watched because Dodge City was playing liberal. Matt Freeze of Dodge City had a huge game against the Redskins. He had 5 catches for 153 yards and 3 touchdowns. He had a 58-yard punt return for a touchdown. He also had another punt return for a touchdown and a kickoff return for a touchdown, both called back on blocking in the back penalties. So Matt Freese pretty much did whatever he wanted to liberal, unfortunately. Another big game from the WAC, Jordan Dale, the Hayes quarterback, 229 yards rushing and 4 TDs on 12 carries. He also had a 65-yard touchdown pass. And from 8-man, Colton Bennett of Spearville. Remember Spearville's win over Mineola, 38-22. Colton Bennett of Spearville had 209 yards on 13 carries. Now, I'm sure there were plenty of other great performances across the state last night. Those were just some of them that I saw highlighted in different places as I checked around. But there were some great games going on in Kansas, some big wins for some teams, some very, very competitive games, and that's exciting to see. You know, we've talked about kind of getting back to a sense of normalcy for a lot of these kids, and I think it's certainly happening. There are still, you know, there were still games canceled. Bueller and Andover Central was canceled. As a matter of fact, I looked on K-Preps, and there was a list of probably 15, 20 canceled games because of positive tests or one thing or another. Okay, so this virus is still having an impact, and it's going to continue to. Schedules will continue to be fluid as this season goes on, and I think we're going to see that. At the same time, though, we've got a lot of kids getting involved in the activities that they love, and the more we can do that for the kids, I think the better off they're going to be. Let's take a look at Oklahoma and Texas now. In a big game, Hooker traveled to Olton, Texas, and Olton, Texas got the 1-point win, 34-33 over Hooker. Of course, Stratford was at Lakin, where they won 38-16. Texhoma was at Southwestern Heights, where they won 57-0. Guyman in their first game of the season, because they were quarantined for game one. Guyman falls 13-68 to Elk City. So Elk City hanging a lot of points on Guyman there. Turpin 58, Boyce City 24. That's 8-man action from the Oklahoma Panhandle. More 8-man action from the Oklahoma Panhandle. Tyrone 48, Bauco Forgan 56. Tyrone's been very strong the last 2 or 3 years, so that's a big win for Bauco Forgan. It's been a while since Bauco has been quite as strong. Having Forgan consolidate an athletic program with them, I'm sure, has helped. All right. Another close game from the Texas Panhandle. West Texas 34, Groover 28. Groover's been very strong the last couple of years, so that's a big win for West Texas High. Dumas 30-0 over Perryton last night. And back to 8-man action in Oklahoma. Canton 49, Beaver 0. The Dusters down to 8-man. I believe this is their first year down at 8-man, and did not go their way last night. And in probably what is usually one of the biggest games in the state every year in the state of Oklahoma, Jenks and Union played last night. Again, big rivalry game, 2 of the best programs in Oklahoma. Jenks 28-0 over Union last night. So a big win for Jenks there. Now, listen, we're getting action all over everywhere now, okay? Most of the states are playing. Most of the schools are playing. In Texas, the big schools are just now starting to play, and so we're going to see some of that in the coming weeks. But things are, at least in this area, starting to kind of settle in. All right, we're starting to get a little normalcy back into the season. Kids are getting a little bit of it back in their lives. Some of the schools still are not, are primarily in remote learning. Not all of them are in session. But at the same time, we are starting to kind of work our way back to normal here. All right, let's take a look at next week's matchups. Next week in the GWAC, we'll find Colby, 2-0 Colby at 0-2 Ulysses. 1-1 Hugoton at 0-1 Guyman. 2-0 Holcomb at, I believe, 0-2 Southwestern Heights. 1-1 Goodland versus 1-1 Lakin. And 1-1 Scott City at 0-2 Cimarron. I think that Cimarron-Scott City game could be a good game. I'm also kind of looking forward, to be honest with you, to seeing Lakin and Goodland. That'll give us a little bit of an idea of what both of those teams have. In the WAC, we've got 2-0 Hayes versus 0-2 Liberal, and that one at Hayes. We've got 1-1 Dodge City versus 0-2 Garden City in the Hatchet game. Huge rivalry. I think this is the earliest that Dodge City and Garden City have ever played each other in the season here in Game 3. Used to be this was pretty much always the last game of the year, but the Hatchet game is a very heated rivalry, and it's going to be interesting. Dodge City at 1-1. Dodge City won it last year. Garden City 0-2, but I think Garden City may be a stronger 0-2 at this point than Dodge City is 1-1, and we'll see next week. And Great Bend. Great Bend is in action. 0-2 Great Bend at 2-0 McPherson. In the High Plains League next week, we've got 2-0 Syracuse at 0-2 Stanton County. Of course, as we've already said, 1-1 Lakin at 1-1 Goodland. 1-1 Southwestern Heights versus 2-0 Holcomb. 1-1 Sublette at 1-0 Sedgwick. Sedgwick only had one game so far. And 0-2 Elkhart at 1-1 Conway Springs. Those are some long trips there for Sublette and Elkhart, especially for Elkhart. Of course, let's face it, anytime you go north or east, it's a long trip for Elkhart. Conway Springs is traditionally a very strong team. I believe Conway Springs, their one loss this year was a very close loss, maybe even a 1-point loss to Garden Plain, if I remember right. That's one I may not be remembering that right. I look up a lot of these. So, but Conway Springs has had one loss, and that was a close one. Conway Springs traditionally is a very strong program. Now, in the Spa Iroquois League, we've got 2-0 Hodgman County versus 1-1 Buckland, 2-0 Meade versus 0-2 Satanta, 2-0 South Gray versus 1-1 Mineola, 2-0 Spearville versus 0-2 Ingalls, and 0-2 Kiowa County versus 0-2 South Central. Okay, last week in my picks, I picked 15 games. I went 12-3. I was pleased at going 12-3. I was a little surprised at that. I didn't think I'd do quite that well. The three that I picked wrong were Syracuse beat Elkhart. I had picked Elkhart. Spearville beat Mineola. I had picked Mineola. And Buckland beat Kiowa County. I had picked Kiowa County. So let's go over this week's picks. Colby, 2-0 Colby at 0-2 Ulysses. I think Colby is the clear favorite in this game. Colby has already beaten Hugoton, who beat Ulysses, and Colby has beaten Cimarron, who is another strong program. So Colby should be able to get the win over Ulysses. We've got 1-1 Hugoton at 0-1 Guyman. I think the Eagles have probably got enough this year to get by Guyman, so I'm picking Hugoton in that game. 2-0 Holcomb at 0-2 Southwestern Heights. Southwestern Heights had a rough game against Texhoma this week. Look for them to have another rough one against Holcomb next week. Holcomb should get the win there. Goodland 1-1 versus Lakin 1-1. I'm going to pick Lakin in this one, but to me, this is an interesting matchup, and this is a matchup that's going to tell us a lot about each team and what they've got. And last in the GWAC, 1-1 Scott City at 0-2 Cimarron. I'd love to pick Cimarron. My heart's always with Cimarron. I was the head coach there at one time. I love the town of Cimarron, love the people there. But I think Scott City is probably a little too strong for Cimarron at this point. Look for Cimarron to start getting some wins after next week, though. Cimarron's got nowhere to go but up, and they're going to be a good team, I'll guarantee you. But Scott City's probably got enough to get by Cimarron. So Scott City's my pick there. All right, in the WAC, as always, I don't pick liberal games, so the Hayes liberal game's off the slate, but Dodge City and Garden City, the hatchet game, the big rivalry, I think Garden City will get the win in this one. I've seen Dodge City in person, and I've seen Garden City some on film, and I just think Garden City is, of course, it's such a rivalry game. Anything can happen in this game, being honest. But I think Garden City is who ought to get the win in this one. And Great Bend against McPherson. I think McPherson is probably stronger at this point than Great Bend. Great Bend seems to be having a little trouble this season. All right, into the High Plains League. 2-0 Syracuse at 0-2 Stanton County. That is, again, a traditional rivalry there, Syracuse and Stanton County, but I think Syracuse is just too strong for the Trojans this year. Lakin, 1-1 at Goodland. Again, I've already picked that game. I'm picking Lakin in that game. Southwestern Heights, Holcomb. I've already picked Holcomb. Sublette versus Sedgwick. 1-1 Sublette at 1-0 Sedgwick. Sublette's showing some strength, more strength than they have in the past couple of years. But I still think Sedgwick is probably a better program at this point. I'm picking Sedgwick. An 0-2 Elkhart versus 1-1 Conway Springs. Conway Springs is a traditional power, so I'm going to give Conway Springs the edge over Elkhart. Would love to see Elkhart win it, but I think Conway Springs is probably a stronger program. And in the Iroquois League, 2-0 Hodgman County, I believe, will win against 1-1 Buckland. Buckland got a big win this last week, but I just don't think Buckland's got enough to stay with Hodgman County. 2-0 Meade versus 0-2 Satanta. The Buffaloes should get the win in that one. 2-0 South Gray versus 1-1 Mineola. Here I'm going to pick Mineola. I know Mineola had let me down last week, but I think Mineola may be able to play with South Gray here, and the Wildcats hopefully can beat South Gray. 2-0 Spearville versus 0-2 Ingalls. Spearville should be able to get by Ingalls. And Kiowa County versus 0-2 South Central. This is one that's a little tough to pick. Both teams have been down. Both teams have had some similar scores against similar opponents, but I'm still going to hang with Kiowa County and pick them. Kiowa County over South Central. So those are my picks for the week. Those are the scores for the week. If you've got individual performances that you'd like to see us highlight that we didn't, let us know about those, and we'll talk about them Wednesday on the show. You know, it's great to get week 2 in the books. Looking forward to week 3. Unfortunately, I'm still going to be kind of coaching remotely, doing whatever I can remotely for week 3. And after that, Liberal's got an open date, so it's going to be a while before I actually get to coach in a game. But overall, across the state, almost everybody's starting to get back to action, and that's good to see. To me, it'll be kind of interesting to see some of those scores from some of the Wichita City League schools today. That's when they're playing. And so we'll look forward to that. We'll be back with you Wednesday at 8 o'clock. On In the Free Zone with Norm, and Wednesday basically we're going to just kind of talk about what's going on around the state. We won't have a guest. We're just going to kind of talk about what's going on around the state. We may talk about Oklahoma and Texas a little bit, and talk about high school sports in general. Okay. Now, In the Free Zone with Norm and the Saturday Breakdown are produced by Back Home Media. Check out Back Home Media's page, backhomemedia.com. Check out all of the services that they offer. Back Home Media's got some great things going on. You can also see the K-State game right there next to me. Yeah, last I looked, K-State was not doing too well. They were down 28-21. So hopefully the Wildcats can get things together and pull that one out. And the score may well have changed while I was talking to you. But check out Back Home Media. Check out the slate of podcasts that they offer and the services they offer. They're a good company that's doing great things. And we'll talk to you Wednesday evening at 8 o'clock. Thanks, everybody.
Well, I don't think it, I thought it, that's different. I said what I said and I meant it, or lamented. Words given weight without thought in a person, the way that I talk and the way that I ought to be able to pause and to say that the fault can be placed on my arm, to this playful assault, to disgrace in its arm. Pray for the day they could wait for the calm. You can't control the storm, only weather it, whether it's 5 weeks and 5 days of rain sideways, or scorched earth, search for death, or water left with all the thorns, with the petals gone, settle on the breath of autumn. If the ground fits, wear it, the